Today, you are going to get a front row seat to the memorable Springbok career of 1995 Rugby World Cup champion Garry Pagel. Garry, welcome to Front Row Rugby.
Thanks for having me as well. Yeah, nice being here.
Now, before we begin our conversation, let's take a look at today's trivia question. Name the venue that hosted all three test matches in the 2021 Springboks British and Irish Lions series. Now, if you know the answer to the question, you can put it in the comment section down below. And we'll also find out if Garry knows the answer, but we'll do that at the end of our conversation. Garry, I'd like to begin in 1995 in the build-up to the World Cup. Talk to me about those training sessions, those fitness sessions that you guys had before the time, because I've heard that they were quite torturous.
Yeah, I think it sort of started quite a while before the team was even picked, and that Kitch always had a Monday session where players from various provinces would meet up at the Wanderers and that. So it would either running on the golf course and fitness sessions. And it obviously, once the squad was picked, we got into that as well. So some of them were quite hectic, I think. But I think at the end of the day, it was worth the while, and that there was a lot of moaning at the time when it was done. But I think obviously the final did prove that I think we were slightly the fitter team at the end of it. So all good in the end, I think.
I think so too. So 25 May 1995, it's the opening match of the Rugby World Cup. We're playing against Australia. How are you feeling that day ahead of kickoff?
Yeah, I think with the atmosphere at Newlands and that as well, it was actually quite hectic, and that the crowd was quite loud and that. And myself, obviously it would be the first sort of test that I would have played in that. So for me, it was quite a sort of special occasion in that as well, especially being at Newlands. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was that nervous in that. I think we were quietly sort of confident, but also not really sure on how we would perform against the international teams, because it was quite a new thing to us, especially the World Cup setup and that. So yeah, but obviously very happy to get on at the end. Yeah.
As you say, you got on there starting on the bench. Talk to us about what it felt like running onto the field for the Springboks for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, as a South African, and that as a youngster, it's basically everyone's dream. I would think that plays rugby is to play for your country and that. And for me, it meant a lot in that. I mean, I put a lot of hard work into it, and obviously opportunities never happened before, so I knew I had to make the most of it on the chances I got in that. Yeah.
Now, I've heard stories, Garry, about the green team and the gold team and the high road and the low road. Talk to me about how relieved the guys were after seeing off the Wallabies in that opening match.
Yeah, I think Kitch, he had explained it quite clearly before the time on how the teams would be set, and those were the plans. So if we didn't win the first game, that's how things would change. And yeah, I think surprisingly, I think we had quite a good win against Australia. So it sort of opened the door for other players to get their chances against the Canada and Romania, and that it maybe did show a few people that some guys maybe did have a chance to play in sort of maybe not the A team, but yeah, you can call it the A team, but chances did happen from that, yeah.
Next match was against Romania, also at Newlands. You started that one. Garry, I think it's fair to say that people were expecting a big win that day for the Boks, but it didn't quite work out that way. And you might even say that we kind of struggled to get going. What was it about the Romanians that was so difficult to combat?
Yeah, I think maybe for us as a team, I think it could have been that maybe a lot of focus was added to the say now the team, the A team, and that basically, and maybe not enough was focused on the setup of the other side. So a lot of us, although we had been together for a while, and that I thought maybe we hadn't played enough together as a team. And yeah, I think sometimes things happen on a field that I think we were maybe focusing more on just overpowering them with the forwards, and they actually defended well. I mean, they held their own in a lot of phases, and we tended to make quite a few mistakes, I think, which we just couldn't get into the flow of the game. But yeah, I think it was maybe because of the setup before that we didn't play enough together, and I think for a lot of us it was also first time playing in the World Cup, which is quite a I mean, it's quite a big thing as well. So there is a lot of pressure on individuals at that time. But I thought, luckily, at the end of the day, we did pull it through. Yeah.
Garry, I've had 70 former Springboks on this show, and some of them made their debuts, like you did, off the bench. And some of those Boks have told me that it was only when they started a test match for the first time that they felt that they were truly Springboks. Would you go along with that?
I would think so, yeah, to an extent in that I would think so, because you, at that time, as a bench player, you weren't standing on the field singing the anthem, which I think is different. The bench should be off the field, so you weren't really part of the team that started. So obviously, as a starter, yeah, I think it meant a lot more, and I think it still does in a way. Yeah.
And then after that Romania victory, we moved on to Port Elizabeth, as it was still known in those days, to take on Canada. It became known as the Battle of Boet Erasmus. It was a bizarre evening, the floodlight failure before kickoff, and then obviously what the match is well known for now, that brawl in the second half. How do you remember that evening?
Yeah, I also remember, I mean, obviously being on the field, first kickoff and that, then floodlights hit off. So it was quite an adaptation to go back in the changing room and I mean, to stay sort of focused, because I could have been a half an hour, 3/4 hour before we ran on again. I think we always knew they were going to be on the field to try and be in our face, and that obviously you don't think that it would get that sort of serious on the pitch and that, but I think we did probably hold ourselves together, because there were a lot of other niggly incidents on the field which we stood back from. So at the end of the day, it was quite a disruptive game, but also at the end of it, quite physical as well, which I think did help us to focus for the later games in the tournament.
All right, Garry, tell us, did you manage to land a sneaky punch?
No, I was very wary at that time, because I'd obviously had the incident with the Tordo thing with Western Province. I was very wary of getting involved in something, because I think if I was close to anything, they would have obviously targeted me because of previous background. So yeah, I tended to stay away from that.
Quite wise, I think, as well. So, Garry, moving on to the semi-finals, you'll remember in Durban, monsoon-like conditions that day. Is that the kind of match that you look at as somebody who's not in the starting 15 and you think to yourself, maybe this is a good one to be missing out?
No, not really. I think I always wanted to be involved in that. Kitch was quite clear on when he would bring on players, so you knew before the time if you would go on in that. But I think it was just too tight a game to make any changes in the front row, whereas I think it's a bit different now, obviously with the game at the moment. But at that time, I think coaches were very aware to change the setup and that. And I think we were definitely the more dominant in the scrum, so I don't think it was necessary to really change any players in that, although it was very tight. But I mean, if something else happened, he could have maybe said, in hindsight, he should have made the changes. But at the end of the day, I think the calls were right at the time. Yeah.
How nervous were you ahead of the final?
I think at one stage we sort of were. Maybe there were a few sort of like things that went on in the team, but I think because of the tenseness of it, and that maybe players were tense about it, but I think we had sort of a good talk. Front Row did call the team together, and that maybe felt there were things wrong. And I always thought, especially on the day, I didn't really feel that me personally, I didn't feel that we would lose the game in that. Although being New Zealand in that, and the previous games they'd had up to the build up to the final, obviously they were the team to beat in that. But I think we were just more motivated on the day.
Yeah, it's interesting, Garry. I've watched that final back quite a few times, and just my very humble opinion, I don't think that it needed to go to extra time. I thought that we were good enough in the 80 minutes to beat them. It's just the way that it worked out. But to me, they didn't actually look like they were ever going to win that final. Not that I'm saying that we should have won by 20 points, but I think, maybe 12-6 or 12-9 or something inside the 80 would have been a fair reflection. But nevertheless, Jonah Lomu was obviously the big factor and the big talking point during that World Cup. And I've spoken to many of the former Boks from that 1995 era, and it's interesting how different guys remember things differently. And some of them say that there was a lot of talk about Jonah before the final. Some of them say that they hardly discussed Jonah at all. How do you remember the talk about Jonah?
Yeah, the only sort of part I remembered about it is obviously with James. I think he was quite focused on that, and he knew it was up to him. And I think Inge Trigamala at that time had actually phoned him and contacted him and told him how to defend against him, just keep him on the outside all the time. And obviously with Joost and us as well, I mean, that put in quite a few big tackles, and that we realized as a team that if we did sort of mute him out the game, and that it would help us. But I think James obviously was focused on it, maybe nervous about it as well. But I think as a team we sort of quietly just stunned him into a bit of silence, and that I think as a team effort it worked. Yeah, but I don't think we were over focused on just him as a player in the team.
And how were you feeling when you ran on to replace Bali Swart?
Yeah, on a the very special occasion, and that, I mean, also playing out of position against New Zealand. I think they were known for quite a good scrummage inside and that, but I think we definitely had the upper hand on them basically throughout the game. So yeah, and a very, very excited and a very special moment here.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not consider becoming a patron? It's my dream, guys, to do this full time, and with a small financial contribution, you can help me realize that dream. The link and the QR code is appearing on your screen right now, and I'll also put it down in the description area for you to go and click on at a later stage if you would like to do so. And by becoming a patron, I promise there will be great benefits for members. Now let's get back to the interview. Okay, Garry, you obviously got to fulfill a boyhood dream that most of us just cannot relate to. So I'm going to ask you to try and explain to those of us who are mere mortals, what does it feel like when the referee blows the final whistle and you're a rugby world champion?
I think at that game, a person didn't actually really realize what he had achieved in it. I think I was almost basically ready to run off, and Francho actually called the guys back for a huddle on the field and that. So I don't think it really sank in until maybe he started walking around on the pitch afterwards before the handover of the trophy. He realized what he had achieved, but maybe only a few days later that we actually really realized what achievement we had done. Yeah.
And then, as you know, Garry, the game turned professional pretty much after that World Cup. And we've heard all kinds of stories about Francois Pienaar talking to you guys secretly about contracts. What can you tell us about that?
Obviously, there were other, I think it was the Murdoch or whoever it was that was offering other contracts and that. But I think at the end of the day, maybe people were skeptical on that sort of thing with the unknown and that, and obviously decided that we'd go with the unions, which maybe in the long run I think has been the better bet for us as all nations as well. I think the right decisions were made. Some guys would maybe still be unhappy with contracts they had signed that weren't involved in the World Cup side and that, but I think, yeah, it's difficult to say. The other system could have worked as well. So it's difficult to say, but I think personally, we went the right route.
And Garry, it was almost about a year later that you got to play for the Springboks again. What actually happened?
Well, after I think in '95, I'd injured myself in one of the provincial games, and that tore off muscles on the shoulder. So I only really got back into rugby in the following year. And I think Andre Markgraaff was maybe coach at the time. Obviously, coaches have their preferences in players and that. So yeah, I was just lucky enough to be called up for the final test and that, and only played a few minutes at the end. But at least I played twice against New Zealand and haven't lost to them. So yeah, pretty proud of that. But although it's only off the bench, so yeah.
Well, we could certainly make a case that we should have played you every time against the All Blacks then. But tell me, how pleasing was it for you to actually get a chance to, again, play against the All Blacks at Ellis Park in '96?
Yeah, I think it came as a surprise at the end. I was sort of on the in and out of the training squads and that, so one didn't really know what was going on. So for me it was a surprise to be picked for it, and also quite happy in that I had a bit of a chance to play, but not really much. So it's difficult to say. I'd have probably liked to have played more times, but I mean, one can't choose when you're picked in that. It's the coaches pick to tell you what's going on. Yeah.
And how disappointed were you that your Test career ended there?
I think I would have liked to have played a lot more tests than that, but obviously it didn't work out that way. We went on a tour later on in that year to France and Argentina, which I enjoyed, but it was obviously, we were told straight out that you are in the Wednesday side and that's it, but person gets on with it. And I enjoyed the tour as well. We have a good group of players and I think performed well, but I would have liked to have played more tests than that, but anyway, that's how it turned out.
And Garry, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people grow up in South Africa dreaming of playing for the Springboks, and they think that it's going to be a 10-year career. They're going to play 100 test matches like Victor Matfield and John de Villiers, but maybe they might only get to play 5 test matches like you did. What would your advice be to those youngsters?
Yeah, I've always, even with provincial rugby, when I started, the same thing. I mean, if you get a chance to play, and Keith Andrews also said as well, if you get the chance, you've got to make the best of it in that. So I've always tried to do that. Sometimes it doesn't work out because you're trying to overplay, and that you tend to make a lot of mistakes in that. So I've always gone out to say, enjoy yourself, just do your best on the day. And I mean, you can only hope for that. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes and things won't work out your way. You'll get the opponent that you maybe struggle against. And like I say, you just got to make the best of the opportunity and be ready for when that opportunity arises.
You've mentioned both men earlier in this discussion, Garry, Kitch Christie and Andre Markgraaff. You played under the two of them in your short Springbok career. Talk to us a little bit about the two men as coaches and the differences between them as you experienced it.
Yeah, I think myself personally with Kitch and that, I mean, I think at that time we were very provincial orientated players, so there was always the provincial sort of thing to it. And he would, I mean, myself personally, I don't know if he did it to other players, but he would come to me and he would tell me that he saw something in me and he'd give me a chance when chances came. And I mean, that's how it happened. And I made sure that I always put the hard work in and that. So I found that I knew where I stood with him, and maybe not the same with Andre. So yeah. So but every coach has his ideas and players that he sort of backs. So yeah, it's not for me to say who they should be playing. Yeah.
So who was your toughest opponent?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. Internationally, I didn't really play, say, international. I don't know. They get as a tough opponents. Maybe the tougher ones were more on the provincial and the club side and that. So locally, I think a guy like Louis Miller, I always found difficult to play against the late Italian. And other than that, I don't know. That there were difficult opponents at times and that, but I always found Louis to be sort of one of the tougher players to scrummage against. Yeah.
And when you look around today, Garry, is there a particular player that stands out for you that you admire?
Yeah, I think we've got a few in. Obviously, me as a Lucid and that, Kitsoff and that, I think has stood out and has proved himself. Tarteds, which yes, we've got loads of in that, and I mean, like a Vincent Koch and then I mean, I think they've done really well and proved themselves on the international scene. So Yeah, I think we've got loads that are in the background as well that are maybe coming through, and that's yeah, I don't think we've got problems there.
And it's quite scary for our opponents, which is a wonderful thing from our point of view. Garry, I got to ask you, is there a particularly funny moment that you can share with us from your time with the Springboks?
Yeah, no, there could be, but maybe they've told it already. It's about the fish story in Cape Town and that, where the guys bought the fish and then put it in Mark Andrews's bed in the hotel, which was quite a funny thing at that time. And that, yeah. Other than that, I mean, there's loads of. I can't think of them off the top of my head in that now, but there are strange sort of things that do happen, especially on a tour. And that maybe with Nick Mallet, maybe he doesn't remember with the sleeping tablets in his food, and that was also quite a strange moment, which the guys enjoyed, because he was always so serious and wanted to be on point. And yeah, other than that, yeah, no, there have been a few others as well.
Garry, final question. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, I'm retired down in Kleinemonde in the Eastern Cape near Port Alfred, and that a small sort of coastal village and that, and I'm just basically involved in the community and everything. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. So nothing else much in that happening. I've tried to help with some of the sort of the club sides and that, yeah, but it becomes a bit political and training not, and the setup not that great. So I would like to have helped sort of individuals and that, but at the moment there's not much happening here rugby wise and that. Yeah.
It's a lovely part of the world. I haven't been there for many, many years, but it certainly is lovely. Garry, we're going to finish off by looking at that trivia question again. Name the venue that hosted all 3 test matches in the 2021 Springboks British and Irish Lions series. Do you know the answer, Garry?
Would have that been Ellis Park?
Oh, you know what? It was actually the Cape Town Stadium. So you'll remember that because of the COVID stuff at the time.
Taters and that as well, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So they were all played at the Cape Town Stadium, all 3 test matches. And of course, the Springboks won the series, which was wonderful. Garry, let me say, it was lovely having you on Front Row Rugby today. An absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time and sharing those old stories with us. And hopefully we can have you on again in the future.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for having me as well. Yeah, no, it was actually special to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Last time on Front Row Rugby, Morné Visser was my guest. You can go and watch that video. It's appearing on your screen right now. Next time, Drickus Hutton will be here.